Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining this session as part of National Graduate Week 2022. I'm Eloise from Career Map, and I'm really excited to be introducing you to the session with Wiley Edge, all about creating a standout graduate application. And so you're going to get a lot of tips and tricks for the process. There will probably be a lot that you'll want to come back to later, so either take notes as you go, or this will be recorded, so you'll be able to come back to it later and revisit if there's anything you want to take away. You can definitely use the chat throughout if there's anything that comes to your mind, questions, comments, thoughts, whatever you want to add in there. But definitely questions as we go. There will be time for questions at the end as well, but if you do have things that come up as and when, type them into the chat. Technical issues, if you can't hear us, if you can't see anyone, let us know. Again, put that in the chat. I'll be taking a look at it as we go. And there will be some links that will drop into the chat. I think if you just joined, you may not be able to see that, but I'll repost them. And there also will be a QR code at the end of this presentation to take you to more information. But other than that, I'm really excited to present to you this session, and I will hand it over to the Wiley team to take it from here.
Hello everyone, my name's Jade. I work in the partnerships team here at Wiley Edge. We're here to give you a little bit of an overview of how you can create a standout application. We're really excited to support the National Graduate Week, and you might see us throughout the week in some activities, so we do look forward to speaking to you at different occasions. Like mentioned, if anyone has got any questions for either of us during the webinar, please do pop them in the chat. We have around 30 minutes for questions at the end, so we'd really like to hear your thoughts, and we will try to engage with you throughout too. To get the most from today, make sure you've got no distractions, so put your phone on mute and make sure you are fully committed to us. Make sure you are using the tools that we'll be discussing throughout, and I'm sure you'll have access to your career service at university as well. So start talking to them about your applications that you are putting out there. Obviously today we're going to give you some tips, but it's great to have opinions from everyone, including your university. So let's do some introductions of who we have on the call today. So like mentioned, you have got myself. My name's Jade, work in the partnerships teams. You may have seen me dotted around your university potentially, or at a previous webinar. I work quite closely with Paulina and Dash to advertise our opportunities to you lovely lot on the call today. So we know how tough it is out there, and that's why we're here to help. So I'll just go in order. Dash, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name's Dash, and I'm an alumni talent executive at Wiley Edge. I've been with the company for roughly about a year, and during this time I've interviewed about 250 candidates. So what I'd like to do with my time later on is to go through 4 tips that I think will greatly benefit you when you're interviewing with any company. Great, and I'll pass on to Paulina.
Hi everyone, really excited to be here today. I'm Paulina. I work as a senior talent executive here at Wiley Edge. I've been with the company for just under a year now. It's been quite an exciting journey. I specialize in recruitment for banking services, but I also recruit for tech roles. And I'll be going through some for applicational steps, like tips on how to prepare your application, and some motivational stuff as well later on in the application in the webinar. So Ravi, I think I'll pass on to you.
I think you're on mute, Ravi.
Yeah.
Ooh. Now you're on mute, Jade.
Wow, okay, so this is going great. Yeah, looks like Ravi's having a few technical issues. Ravi works for JP Morgan, is it, Dash? Just confirm, yeah,
correct,
JP Morgan. He works as a software developer, and he will be very keen to answer any questions that we've got today. But he'll have to reply via the chat because it looks as though he's having a few issues. So just to go on, obviously, Ravi, if you want to introduce any more of yourself, feel free to just pop it in the chat. But apologies, guys, we didn't think that we'll be having these issues. So next up, just to give you all a bit of idea of what we're going to run through, we're going to talk about what looks good in your CV and how to map that out. We're going to talk about what looks good in a cover letter, what makes a good application form, and what makes a good interview. And as mentioned, we have got that time at the end for any questions. So feel free to make notes as you go on. Like mentioned as well, the session is recorded. And if you've got any questions, we can address that as we go through. So Ravi was going to cover the question time with you guys, but obviously due to the technical issues, you won't hear his voice today, so apologies for that. So let's get you awake and ready and prepared for the webinar. So if you can pop in the chat on your right what you think the answer to this would be. So on average, how much time does an employer spend reading your CV? Now, it is quite a shocking figure. I didn't really expect this one. It can be at any point, so it could be maybe, I don't know if you're going to get the job, or maybe if you're not going to get the job. So what do you guys think that would be? So we've got a few dropping in. It could be a minute, 30 seconds. I'll give you another second or so. Just have a think of what that could be. 5 minutes. Okay, well, actually, the answer is 6.25 seconds on average. It's actually even less if your CV doesn't attract your employer's attention. So it's really important that you do make your CV and pop out at that first initial thought. So we'll just go on to the next question. Thank you very much for everyone who's replied to that. So how many graduate CVs are rejected? So this is on whole for any position that anyone will go to. So you might want to think about maybe how many CVs an employer may get, and then maybe what percentage of those CVs are being rejected. I'll give you a minute to sort of think about that one. Again, it is quite a shocking figure, this one. Wow, 97%. That is a good figure. Yeah, 67, 65. Yeah, you're going along the right sort of side. It is actually 50%. So you can imagine that this isn't the best feeling, and that's why today we want to give you those tips to improve. 50% is a shocking figure that does go through to the next stage, and obviously that could be going through to online tests, video interviews, maybe final stage interview. So we'll talk about them a bit more in depth. So thank you again for people replying there. And the last question that we've got is, how many applications does the average firm receive for a graduate job? So you may know that there's companies out there that are maybe taken on for graduates in 2023 or graduate positions maybe in November, for example. So this is being more direct, let's say. So how many applications does an average firm receive for a software developer or production support? Sienna, you are right, definitely lots. Okay, yeah, so this one here is actually around 2,000 applications, but for per actual role, it's 50. So again, this just sort of enhances the fact that, you do need to stand out. We are recruiting for software developers at the moment, as well as banking services and production support. So you can imagine the volume that the likes of Dash and Paulina are going through. And it's important that we do take that time to really stand out to employers. So thank you so much, guys, for running through those questions. It's been really good to see your insight on that and speak to you all today. So what I'm going to start with is the nitty-gritty side, so more so about your CV. So you must update your CV for every company you apply for. The employer will want to ensure you have understood the job description and your motivations to apply should be clear. As mentioned in the question time just there, the employer will receive a lot of applications, and therefore they will want to ensure that you are committed to that specific company. So please make sure you do make it clear that you want to work for them in your opening statement. Creating a CV is not a one-off. It should be a continuously updated document. So make sure you are reading your job descriptions when you are looking to apply for roles. To put it more into context of Wiley Edge, if we were recruiting for a software developer role, we would expect you to demonstrate problem solving, enthusiasm to learn, and being a team player. Whereas maybe if you were applying to work in marketing, we would want you to be more creative with your stance, show points where you've had to think on your feet, and be really aware of maybe colour schemes, that sort of thing. So to go on to the next point, which obviously I'm just going from the slide up now, there's a lot of different CV layouts, and I know it's really hard to find which one would be the best fit. Obviously, Microsoft Word's got a lot of different templates on there, and you see all sorts all over the likes of Google and all of those other search engines. So if you're looking to go into marketing, you might be looking at like a creative sort of CV. So they do look a lot into colours and more into extravagant layouts. And you might be looking at colours, banners, images, that sort of thing. However, on a norm, it's good to stick with the traditional format for an employer. The main thing is that your professional identity is communicated and it's formal. As you can see on the screen, I've listed a few things you should bear in mind. Your CV should be no longer than 2 pages. Try not to waffle, keep it to the point, and make sure you use language which anyone would be able to understand. So try to avoid jargon and acronyms. Keep it simple. The presentation of the CV should be neat, so please ensure that you've got headings, bullet points, your font's all the right. The font is all the same throughout, should I say. Make sure your sizing's correct. And get one of your friends to proofread it as well, or leave it and go back to it with a fresh set of eyes after half an hour or so, because when you are staring at a screen for so long, it is normal to miss things. So do try to go back to it or get somebody else to proofread for you. And thinking about the content of your CV. So you do not need to include the likes of your date of birth, your nationality, your marital status, that sort of thing. It should literally be your name, address, email and phone number at the top of your CV. So please ensure these are up to date and regularly monitored. There's been a number of times in the past that I can recall when maybe I haven't monitored an email inbox and I've put the wrong email on, or even you've updated your mobile number and you haven't checked. So just make sure your correspondence information on there is correct. And then the last part on the slide is more so about your personal statement. So this is about who you are, the skills and experiences which you can bring to the role and why you want to work for that employer. A lot of people do see this quite daunting because maybe you're not aware entirely what should be in this personal statement. But for a lot of us, in terms of the recruitment world, they will read this first personal statement because it's the first thing they see on the page. So we've got to make sure this is on point. So let's look at an example. So we've got one here, which I got from a blog online. It's a real personal statement. So I'll give you a moment or so just to read over that. I won't talk too much while you're doing that. So I know that you're probably just skimming over it at the minute, so I'll just start talking just while you're doing that. What makes this great is that you get a real sense of the character when you're looking at this specific personal statement. They tell you about how they're educated to biochemistry, they're a junior digital marketer, they're talking about the freelancing. You could see that they're technically proficient with sound communication. You understand more about them. So they are showing their skills and they are actually showing them to the point that it's relevant to the employer. They've even mentioned the name throughout there. So I would say on a whole, this is probably one of a statement sort of format that you should follow. It's personable, it's relatable for the employer, and it will entice them to read on as they are going through your CV. So here's just a few more tips on other changes that you could look at for your CV. So you'll know that your CV will need to have your employment history. Ideally, these sections should include all your paid jobs and work experience. If you have a lot if you have a lot of work history, try to put things that are most relevant to the role that you are going for, maybe within the last 5 years or so. So I would start with the most recent jobs first, including your job title, company name, dates employed, and then bullet point any key responsibilities that you've had. Don't forget if you've had any achievements here in a particular role that you've been in, try to put that in. Numerical data such as I increased sales by 10% by doing this, or I've came third in this award will really stand out to an employer's eye. So try to include anything like that you have done. Especially being at university, I know that maybe you may have looked at doing a student ambassador role, or you may have got a consistent achiever award, or being part of a society too. Try to put something like that in when you're discussing any roles in university. That also does help you to stand out. You don't need to put the contact details of your employer or reasons for leaving or salary. That's not needed. If it is needed later on in the application process, obviously you'll be known, but it's not needed at this point. And then moving on to your education and qualifications, you will need to put the type of education, the grade, the place studied, and the date. If you've got a lot of experience in education, such as, for example, a lot of you would have attended school, so you obviously will have a lot of GCSEs there. You don't need to list every single one. You can put something such as 8 GCSEs at A star to C, and then you can go from there. In this specific section, I would talk more about your modules if they are relevant. So obviously, if you were going to do let's say a police officer's role, and you came from a criminology background, you may want to be listing here that you've done a role, that you've done modules in things such as criminal prevention, or maybe the equality in the justice system, things like that, so you can see that it's relevant. And then that takes us on to the skills and achievements part of your CV. So this part is not compulsory, but it will help you stand out. And it's important you demonstrate your understanding of the job description in this section. So read it thoroughly, write down maybe 5 or so key skills that you found in that, and then talk about how your skills can be demonstrated in the role. Obviously making it relevant to whichever role you're going to be applying for. Make it unique. So anyone can make a list of skills. Make sure that you stand out, draw from your education, draw from your work experience, or even your extracurricular activities. And sometimes it's good to make another section and name it personal interests. Sometimes people might put going to the cinema, going out with friends, that sort of thing, but try to make it relatable. If you're going to go for a mechanical role, think about if you're doing things in your spare time, such as building computers or, doing something really problem solving, like that's what the employer will be interested in doing. So try to make this personable to whichever role you are going for. And then the last part here, we're going to look at references. So again, there's no need to put details in this point. If you are successful for the position, you will be asked for reference details. So at this point, it's a little bit too early. So you can put references available upon request, and then we'll ask you for more details at a later point. So in summary, with the CV, tailor the content for every role you apply for. Make sure your CV is an honest reflection of you and your experiences. Highlight skills and achievements throughout. Ensure your CV grabs the reader's attention, and check that the formatting is consistent. So go back, check your font and spelling, and always finish with a good proofread, like mentioned. So I can see that a few questions have came through just while I've run through. What size font do you recommend? It's entirely up to you. Obviously, again, it depends what role that you go for. Maybe verge from maybe like a 10 to a 12, that sort of thing. Make it readable. That's the biggest thing. Can you use the skills listed in a job description to create your CV too? Definitely, yeah. Like mentioned, that's further down. You could do a little section on your skills and interests there. That would be really good. And it's important to make your CV readable. Definitely agree. Yeah. What if you don't have any work experience? Don't worry too much. I will focus more on your education. Obviously, talk about maybe more what you've been doing at university. There would have been things such as maybe societies you've been in, or maybe you've been volunteering places, that sort of thing. So don't worry too much. But if you've got more questions about the CV, I can definitely answer them at the end. So I'm just going to move on to the cover letter section, and then I'll hand over to Paulina. I think it's after this. So the cover letter is a really crucial point to make your application stand out. It's one of the easiest and most effective ways to stand out, and it brings a little bit more detail about how you would be the best employee for the role that you're applying for. So I'm going to show you a little example of a cover letter. I obtained this as well from a blog online, so it is a real cover letter, but for the purpose of the PowerPoint, I have cut out the person's contact details and removed any names. So I'll give you a few moments just to look over that again. Won't give you too long. So again, I know that you guys will just be skimming through, but the session is recorded. So if you want to take a little bit more time, you can come back. So the positives of the cover letter is it's well structured. It's got a great opening summary. It shows the role which the person's applied for within the company specifically, and it will grab the employer's attention because it has got that unique opening. The bullet points not only make it easy to read, but it clearly states the key skills which the person holds, which would be beneficial to the role. And this one in particular was a materials engineer. And then the better parts maybe, or the things that could be improved, you could think about mentioning a key point about the company which really interested you. For example, have they just won an award for being sustainable? Have they just maybe gone forward because they want to have this target by 2025, that sort of thing. So have a look into the company, look into their homepage, and look into further afield on their website. A lot of people applying for the roles will just go straight on the homepage and see the first thing they can see. But to show your passion, really research the company and pick something out that you know that you could talk about if prompted at the interview. And if you take a closer look to this cover letter, there's a few spelling mistakes, grammatical issue, that sort of thing. So again, please make sure you're proofreading or get somebody to look over it. And one other thing which I possibly would change, but it's not crucial, the bullet point approach, sometimes depending on the role that you're applying for, it may need more formality in it. So you could look at putting this into a paragraph, and then you could expand on each sort of skill and then give a more role specific answer to that. So going on to the tips for this one, I would use a traditional layout. Make sure you include your name and your contact details at the top along with the company's details. Don't be tempted to use fancy fonts, colours or sizes. Try to find out the hiring manager's name to make it more personable. Secondly, make it easy to read and review. Think about how many cover letters the employer is reading. Try and keep it to one page. As we talked about on the previous slide, try to show your enthusiasm, showcase your skills and experience through how you would suit that specific company. You should normally have around one paragraph dedicated to this on your cover letter. And finally, don't forget to proofread. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's really important. Just like your CV, ensure that there's no spelling mistakes. Remember, this is the first impression the employer will have of you. So I'm just going to have a quick glance over to see if there's anything that I can look at. What if you don't bullet points yet? Not all employers do ask for a cover letter. It is just a case of, if you think this will help you stand out, which I think it personally will, you should always try to have one prepared, but it's not essential. Spend looking at cover letters. How long do employers spend looking at cover letters? Honestly, I would probably say it's the first thing they read before they go to your CV. It is a sense of they probably do skim read it. I don't know the exact time off the top of my head. But yeah, that's why I've mentioned this here. If you try to keep it as brief as you can, but try and keep it to that one page. So I'm just going to pass on to my lovely colleague to take on the applications form.
Yes, hi again. So moving on to the application process. So recruitment can be a really, could be a daunting and a stressful process for quite a number of people, especially graduates, if obviously some people don't have any experience or have very little experience, or experience that isn't necessarily related to the role that they're applying for. Sometimes companies may ask you to submit a CV, a cover letter, and an application form, and other employers would ask you to literally put your name, email address, phone number, and just attach your CV to progress you to the next stage. The most important thing is to try not to duplicate any information that you put on your application form, especially if you're attaching a cover letter and a CV together with the application. A lot of people do it, but it doesn't look very good if you do copy and paste, let's say, the same information in 2 or 3 different documents. So just making sure to read everything through and make sure you provide somewhat different information to what you have in your CV and your application to make it look more interesting to the recruiter, or obviously the employer that's looking to hire. And I think we can move on to the next slide.
I'll be your navigator if you like, Paulina. Just give me a shout.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't see that next button. Anyway, sorry. So top tips for the application form. Reading and following instructions on the website, or receive the anywhere you submit your application, right? So there is various ways of you submitting an application. When you go through an employers directly, so on a website that you say, let's say, look for an let's say if you go to wileyedge.com website, you can submit your application directly through there. We also post our jobs on the LinkedIn. We work with different search engines. So let's say if you do apply somewhere on, I don't know, Indeed, right? And anywhere you submit an application, always look through what the employer is actually looking for. Meaning that obviously anything that you have in your CV does match in some ways what the employer is looking for. So obviously making sure that the information and the skill set that you have in your CV has something that the employer can look out for, something that stands out, and obviously something that would be interested for them to reach out to you and progress with your application. Answer every question fully. What that means, sometimes when there is an application that you go through, there is some questions related to your motivation about working in that company. Sometimes they may ask you a few behavior questions, like what would you do in this particular situation? So obviously making sure that you do focus on an answer rather than doing like a general overview of what would happen, actually reading and understanding the question and then answering that question fully to how you understand or how you would react to that particular situation, because that can also help the employer or the recruiter match your skills and your motivation to what they are looking for in terms of personality and skills wise for that particular team. Making sure details are all accurate. So if you obviously do submit, obviously your details like your name, your contact details, email address, some obviously details that you would be getting in touch with the recruiter or the company that you are applying for. So obviously making sure that you do give all the details that you obviously want them to check as well. So stuff like your diplomas or your certificates or your education or working. So like your experience. So just making sure that you do put when and where you've worked in particular cases, so that people can obviously, recruiters and employers can match those details to just obviously check that the amount of, let's say, time or length you've had at a company does also match what they're looking for. All kinds of roles and responsibilities and skills within your experience. So obviously that just means that whatever responsibilities or skills you would put on your CV under that particular experience that you've had, when you do go through an application and see what is required from the employer for that particular role, just try to tailor your responsibilities and skills to what they are looking for. Because sometimes when a recruiter is looking for an application, it does happen that when you don't have any sort of skills or responsibilities that you have previously done at your company, even if it does match, let's say if you have worked as an accountant, but you haven't put any skills or responsibilities that you have done that would match the current role that you're applying for, it might sometimes mean that your application will be rejected. So trying to, and that goes on to following the instructions as well, just making sure that some of the responsibilities do match. Always completing the additional information section. That varies from company to company. In terms of Wiley Edge, so we do have something like putting your, let's say, starting date, your availability, your notice period, when you're completing university, so when you're graduating, just to give us a little bit more information as to when we would be in a position to progress with your application. So if there is an additional information section on the application for the role you're applying for, please do make sure you complete it. Proofreading your application, so just triple checking that the information that you provide is 100% accurate in terms of especially your personal details. And of course, your CV doesn't have any errors, isn't encrypted. There's everything that you want to submit and you want the employer to see is sent exactly as you want it to send. So just making sure that everything is correct. And then sending the application. And of course, one thing that I did want to add as well, it's a little bit about motivation for applying for a particular role. So some of you might be graduating from various different subjects, right? In terms of why do you want to work for this particular company, or why did this particular role interest you? So sometimes there are people that apply for roles, they literally see a role and they'll apply and they'll send 100 applications and they'll just wait for someone to come back. And sometimes when the recruiter comes back with, do you have time to have a chat to me? Let's schedule a quick call to discuss the role. And the person doesn't even know what kind of role they've applied for, because they were literally just sort of like in a batch, right? Just sending the applications through. When you really want to work somewhere and you research the company, you find out what the role is about. Even if you don't have the skills, like with us, you don't necessarily have to have much experience, because we provide the resources, right, to get you through the next stages. So just thinking about what motivates you to apply for this particular role or to work with that company. I tend to say to my candidates that when you research about the company, try to think about how that company can actually help you meet your goals in the future. So how they can, implement their own sort of resources into your career to make you successful and to make you grow within that industry and with that particular company. So that would be all from me. Thank you very much, guys. And passing on to Dash, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. That's right. Can we go to the next slide? Great. So yeah, hey everyone again. As I said earlier, today I'm going to be just going over some 4 tips on how to do well in your interview. So the first tip is pretty intuitive. You need to make sure you research the company, your interviewer, and the role. So when researching a company, you should look to recent news involving the company. Have they recently acquired a new business? Have they held an event? What changes in the market do you think are affecting the company? These are all things that are great to learn in preparation. Also, it's quite important to learn the mission statement of the company. Companies will usually ask about this, and you don't want them to catch you out. As for the role, you obviously won't know the intricacies of the day-to-day of the job, but if you can try and learn as much as you can. So what I would suggest doing is printing out the job description, look at each requirement and responsibility, and think about which bits of your experience are relevant. You want to be matching your experiences to the job's needs. Finally, it's important to learn about who you're going to be having the interview with. Look them up on LinkedIn. Maybe you went to the same school or have a common connection. And even if you don't share a common interest or connection, most interviewers will be monitoring their LinkedIn. So they'll get a notification once you've looked at their profile. This will show the interviewer that you're interested in the role and you've done some time with your research. And this instantly just gives them a better impression of you. So knowing and being prepared for these sort of things will help you in an interview. That being said, the next tip is to never use a script. This never looks good and makes the interview seem really robotic. Think about it this way. When you're actually doing the job, you won't be able to carry a script around with you. The same thing goes for interviewers. So they're thinking the same thing. So you need to kind of seem like a good fit for the role. You need to show that you're able to think on your feet. It's fine to refer to notes. That's totally fine. But the main thing is you shouldn't be reading off a document. Next is you want to be building a rapport with your interviewer. People just want to work with individuals they get along with. That's just sort of a fact of life. So I always think a good interview runs more like a conversation rather than a Q&A. For instance, the preamble part that happens at the beginning of the interview, it's much more crucial than you think. Questions like, how's your day going so far? What did you get up to on the weekend? Or what are your plans for the weekend? These are all like great conversation starters. So basically the small talk is much more important than you might think. Finally, it's really important to ask questions after you finish the interview. Here are some things you can ask about. For instance, you can say, if I managed to get the role in a year's time, what would you make you think that you made the correct decision in hiring me? Also, you can also ask the interviewer, how the interview went. A lot of the time, it's hard to get feedback on how you did in the interview. You kind of just wait and end the interview and wait for them to get back to you. But if you ask them on the call, they'll definitely give you some pointers on how you did. So great. Those are the 4 main tips, but one sort of final extra tip, and maybe this is a bit blunt, but remember, it is a numbers game. You want to try and apply to as many places as possible and not get discouraged by rejection. But what will make you, stand out a lot more during interviews is something called the STAR technique, which we sort of touched on a little bit in the previous slide. But I think if we go to the next slide, there'll be some more on that. Great. So cool. So the STAR technique, it stands for situation, task, action, result, and reflection. So essentially, what you want to do, describe the situation and when it took place, explain the task and what was the goal, provide any extra details about the action that you took to attain this, conclude with the result of your action, and kind of reflect on what you've learned from the experience. So essentially, what you want to do is you want to have a bank of experiences in your head ready to go. Like, what skills did you develop through this experience, and how do you think these skills are relevant to the job that you're applying for, and what has this experience taught you? This is what interviewers want to hear when they're asking you questions. So it is pretty basic. If you think about some general questions that people might ask you during interviews, just think about the STAR technique and how you would answer them using that technique. So hopefully what I've discussed will be useful for you going forward for interviews. There are some questions that I can see. I would think, always when it comes to like what you should wear during an interview, I think you should always lean on the side of formal. It's better to be overdressed than underdressed typically. Nowadays, when it comes to should you arrive early for an interview, and if so, how early? Most of the interviews I do and most of the interviews that you'll get are going to be online. So you always want to make sure the tech stuff is working first. So you want to get there at least 5 minutes beforehand to see that everything's working. If you don't have any fancy stuff to talk about in your work experience, I think, if you're graduates from university, so obviously you've done projects before. So kind of dwell on that. Think about how these projects would be suited to different types of, roles that you might be doing in the interview. Cool. I think that's it for the questions. So should I hand back to you, Jade?
Yeah, thank you so much, Paulina and Dash, for doing those chats. Ravi, I don't know if you've managed to get on yet properly, but really big miss. At least we're able to do the questions. Yeah, Ravi, still looks like you're having those technical issues. Oh, never mind. But no, guys, all of the information's up on there. Obviously, those are our names. Well, Paulina and Dash are recruiters. I work in the partnerships team, and Ravi works as a software developer in JP Morgan's, which is obviously a client of ours. I can run through a few different questions that I did have. There was one in specific that I did read in relation to the CV side. The question was, how do you think I can make my CV better if my job experiences are not necessarily related to the job I am applying for? And I just really want to bring this one to light, because I'm sure Paulina and Dash would confirm that, you guys haven't had interviews where maybe a software developer is there ready. Like, it's completely normal to be a graduate and not have experience in that sort of field or even job experience. And as long as you've got skills or examples of things maybe in your life that you can bring to the CV or even to your interview, for example, that will really help. We're looking at your motivations here. So make it clear why you want to apply for a role and why you would be the best sort of fit, if you want to put it, for that company or that specific role, and you will be absolutely fine. But I think we've got Eloise here.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your presentation. Really insightful and so many good tips. So I hope all of you were taking lots of notes. And if you didn't take notes fast enough, don't worry, because you will be able to come back and look at the recording again. So I really recommend that you do that. And I think you answered pretty much all of the questions. There was one, just a couple of people asking about AI and employers using like software to scan CVs and keywords, and how does that all work these days?
Yeah, I mean, Dash, Paulina, I know you guys work on the tech side more than me, so please answer if I'm saying wrong. But does that mean, do you think, in terms of like how does it come in the interview, or is it more in the role, do you think, Eloise?
Yeah, I think it's more like if you submit a CV, are they using like a piece of software to like scan that for keywords and then discard CVs that don't fit or something like that?
Interesting. I've worked for two recruitment agencies, two companies now where I've worked in the recruitment space. Both of them have read the CVs. The company that I worked for before Wiley Edge were a big tech company that they were known all over the world. So I still haven't seen that sort of the AI side come in yet, but I might be wrong. There might be some companies out there that do that, but I think it's part of a recruiter's role to make sure that you're getting the best candidate for the position. So of course they're going to be looking through, and although it is monotonous because you do get a lot of applications, it's important that we try to make it stand out as best as possible.
And there was one in the Q&A. I think this might have been touched on in different places as well, but what is your advice for making your CV as good as possible if you have lots of job experiences but they're not directly related to the actual job you're applying for?
Yeah, we did touch upon this slightly. I mean, Dash, do you want to maybe expand on this one? Because it's a lot to do with like interview as well, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. So I think when it comes to your CV and your experience, obviously you want the most relatable stuff to be on your CV towards the actual position. You do want to cater your CV to the specific job that you're applying to. But when it comes to relevancy of your previous roles and stuff like that, that is quite general. So if you worked in like retail or customer service or whatever, those are team building skills. Those are collaboration skills as well. You need to kind of have a more open like a view of it. You just need to think about there's a lot of experiences you have, and a lot of them will be relevant, but you just have to kind of think more about how they're relevant. So obviously, lean into the stuff which is extra relevant, but there are things will be relevant once you think about it a bit more.
Yeah, we also had a sort of related question that I think said, should I use the skills in the job description to then tailor my own experiences to those? So is that something you would recommend, like looking at that?
To an extent, like you obviously don't want to just copy paste it, because I think that just doesn't show that you've thought about it really. So you want to kind of transcribe it and kind of relate it to who you are. You want to take those words and make them your own essentially. So yes and no, I guess.
Yeah, I think to add on that as well, there's nothing worse, in my opinion, where you've got a CV and you'll say, for example, I love bacon. And then you then go on to your application and you put your hobby exactly the same. So it's like you are given the same skills throughout. A way to stand out is by, really, really thinking about that. So, you might put in your first example, I love bacon and I really like making cakes and that sort of thing. But then in your application, you could maybe talk about more skills that you're doing. So you could say maybe that, you like reading, and the reason behind that is because you like reading books about like baking, for example. So if you don't have a lot to expand upon, just try to think about more what you're doing in that specific skill that will make you stand out.
Makes sense. That's great advice. Okay, we have a couple new questions. This is interesting. If offered a drink, for example, coffee, should you refuse and not drink while in the interview? I guess this is probably mostly for in-person, maybe for online as well, if you have your own drink.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I don't know. I think, like, obviously, if you're in person, like, feel free. I'm sure the interviewer wants you to be at ease, 100%. I know I would be. So take a drink. You're not going to be judged. That sort of thing.
I wouldn't discriminate against that. I'd be like, oh no, this candidate's bad because they're just been offered a coffee. No, that's fine. Obviously, like that being said, when you're interviewing, you want to kind of go to a private place and have a space where you're able to do that well. But if you're offered a drink, there's no real issue in that. It's nice to have water as well, or coffee during an interview as well. I think that's helpful for me. So I don't think it's too much of an issue.
And on that thought as well, I always have a glass of water when I'm in an interview, and I always think, well, even being a recruiter, I think like I still worry about interviews. I know that's really weird, even though we do them every day, but yeah, like I think it's important to know that you can take the time too. So if you've just been asked a question, or something's going to go up and you've got a drink there, take a drink, take a second. Your recruiter or the interviewer, whoever you're speaking with, whether it's the hiring manager or whoever it is on the team, they will not mind that you've took that time just to sit there and have a drink, collect your thoughts, and then answer. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's great advice. Okay, so we have a question that is about the additional information section. I guess this is in the CV or maybe in the job application or both.
Yeah.
What would you include? Any top tips for how to deal with that section?
Paulina, I know you touched upon that side. Do you want to?
Yeah, so it does really depend on what the employer is asking on the application. Sometimes it is just a blank box where you could put something like let's say if a company doesn't ask for a cover letter, for example, but gives you an additional information box, you could actually put some additional skills or like present your skills a little bit more to make them stand out rather than just having them on your CV. Otherwise, the additional information section sometimes could be stuff like inclusion, diversity, so religion. So it could be anything that you can sort of submit to the new employer. So if a company is looking for a diversity in their team, let's say they're looking for don't know, in technology, let's say they're looking for a female to join their team, or someone, like if you have a disability, for example, and if you're not quite sure, or you're not sure if you should be applying for a role like that, there's like nothing to sort of be ashamed of in that sense, because a lot of employers do have those policies, and they welcome every single person with every single disability, and they do try to make it as comfortable for them as well. So from personal experience, my sort of interviews as well tend to be pretty informal. I have been in many recruitment processes before. And even if you pause, or if you stutter, or anything happens during that interview, I can assure you the recruiter is not going to mind. They'll be like, take a minute, get a breather, take some time to gather your thoughts. And then they'll give you that space to share your ideas and your experiences and what you want to say after that. So it's anything that you can, submit to the employer to let them know who you are as a person, and for them to understand how can they accommodate you better, and obviously your needs better as well in that sense.
That makes sense. Okay, we have a question which is really about, I think this is a bit of an eternal dilemma, really, which is when you need some experience for a job, but you kind of need the job to have any experience. What would you recommend for someone who has been applying for jobs that require a certain level of experience, but they can't really get that experience without having experience?
Yeah, I can maybe do a little bit on that. So, talking as a graduate myself, I studied sociology about 4 years ago now. And I graduated and I had absolutely no idea what role I wanted to go into, which I'm sure a lot of you on this call will be exactly the same. It's really daunting going into a graduate role. So if you guys know exactly your avenue, great for you. But if you don't, then don't worry. In this particular example where you're going through a position that requires experience, try to do some volunteering work behind the scenes, like I thought I wanted to go into sort of the criminal side of it. So I started volunteering in probation offices, that sort of thing, because I knew that I couldn't work there without having experience. So, if you want to go into the likes of a mechanical graduate, I'm not sure what that sort of entails precisely, but if you want maybe that side, if you want to start volunteering in things such as, I don't know, like workshops or like in a garage, that sort of thing, then you would start to get experience, not exactly the same, but it would be similar, and then you would be able to gain some transferable skills in that sense, because a lot of these roles today, I mean, a lot of graduate positions do ask you to have some sort of experience, but they're just looking to see whether you have got the skills which would be transferable. So anything that you do have, just try to put over in your motivations for the role. I hope that helps.
That makes sense. And I guess it's also about showing your passion for the field. Like experience sometimes demonstrates that you've really gone out there, and so it can kind of serve two purposes, I guess.
Definitely.
Okay, I think this picks up on your point where you were saying about maybe using different skills for the application and the CV. So if they hit on the same section, so this person says, how can you make them different when they're requesting the same information, like same headings, but you were talking about maybe using a different skill set or just deepening your skill set on one?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can see on one of the questions there, it mentions, for example, education. So on my CV, I might say I studied sociology. I done X, Y, and Z modules, and that meant that I had a better understanding of this. And then in the application, it might say, you know, what education have you got? And I'll say I attended university. You know, I was in this society. Because I was in this society, this is what I gained from it. And then maybe if you're asked it a third time in an interview, you could say, I went to this university. The reason that I picked this university was because it was really good, because it specialised in science, and that's something that I really wanted to go into. And then that would lead you on to another point. So it's just about picking out the reasons and maybe the skills that you may have got while doing that particular role or being in that particular industry. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Great.
Okay, so I think this is our final question so far. So if you do have any last questions, just get them in now before we do this last one. Is it bad to take a moment to answer a question an employer has asked? I think we said no, but it was actually good and maybe even powerful to take a moment. But then the second part of this question is, how long is too long to think of an answer?
Oh, Paulina, Dash, you guys are the recruiters here.
I think, well, for me personally, I don't know about you, Paulina, 10 seconds to like 20 seconds is totally fine. And it's good to think like, okay, just give me a second to think about that. I just want to formulate my thoughts. If someone says that, I find that kind of impressive as well. I wouldn't let it last more than 30 seconds to a minute. And, you know, the people do things and to kind of try and cope with the awkward silence. A lot of the time I see candidates doing like this, like in their chair. So, you know, you just have to be cautious of these things. 10 seconds, I think, is kind of the perfect amount of time you want to use.
And you were mentioning you could say something like, could you just give me a moment to...
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that is all of the questions that we have. I see Ravi just dropped his details in the chat, so that's very kindly offering to connect on LinkedIn. If you have extra questions, that's where to head. Oh, sorry, we just have one last question here. Do we need to revise what we have learned in our degree, like an MBA? I guess that means maybe, yeah.
In Wiley Edge specifically, I know that maybe this candidate isn't looking at Wiley Edge, but there might be. We ask our graduates to have an understanding of, you know, what they're going to go in and have that experience. It's not about revising, but that would be hard to say for every role that they were going to go for. So, you know, maybe if you're going to be doing an accountancy degree and you're going to go and be an accountant, it would be important to understand, you know, what the training's like before you start your role, because if the training's quite short, maybe you do need to do a little bit of revision of what you do already know. However, at Wiley Edge, we offer 6 weeks training at the beginning, so it would mean that we would sort of bridge the gap between leaving university and then going on to employment. So it's important that the student asking that does really look into the training before starting.
I'm sorry, just one last one from the Q&A. They all come in at the end. That's always the way. So this is a good question. It was mentioned that it's good to state figures. For example, I helped increase sales by 30%. What else can you put to make your CV stand out if you don't have that kind of data or analysis? What else? Other examples, I guess.
Yeah, just like any sort of achievements or something that's made you stand out. So I appreciate that, and not a lot of people will have the, you know, the 30%, the sort of numerical data. But just like little things, maybe. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head that could be maybe relatable. So if you have maybe performed really well, maybe you work in a customer service role at New Look and there's been, you know, 20 customers come in that day. You were the only person on till and you've had to deal with that. There may have been complaints coming through. You know, you may have had to work to a target. I know they do a lot of that sort of thing in like Lidl and Aldi. So just think about times when maybe you've worked towards a target in your role or education. And then how you've actually responded to that. Going back to Dash's point of the STAR technique, and I know Paulina touched on it, it's about having a situation, showing the action that you've done, and then how you'll learn from it next time, or potentially what you would do differently. So try to use that technique to stand out if you haven't got any specific numerical data.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, so I think that is all of the questions. And this session will be recorded again, so remember you can always come back. Get that QR code while it's still up, and also the link that's in the chat. If you just scroll down a little bit, you need to grab that. And any final words of wisdom or things that you want to leave the students with, or any last pieces of advice, I guess, to take away?
I think we should do one by one, guys. Yeah, I would say just be yourself. Try and be unique. You know, you need to stand out, as there's been a few comments throughout. You can apply for loads and loads of positions. Don't be downhearted. Just keep going. Yous are so young. Yous have got the whole life of your head ahead of yous. Even if yous are later in your graduate world, just don't worry. Things happen for a reason, and you'll find your avenue. Dash, anything from you?
Yeah, just like kind of a main point is just don't be discouraged by rejection at all. You know, it's like I said before, real quickly, it is a numbers game. You just have to. It's an interviewing is a technique and a skill, and with practice, makes perfect. You just have to get used to it, and this is something everyone has to do. So don't feel too bad about not getting a job or something like that. You just need to keep trying, and eventually something will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll just add, like, not to force anything as well. So sometimes, if you send so many applications and no one comes back, it might just not be, the time period that, something is happening. The recruitment side we do also have like quiet moments, which means that, companies have a period where they don't recruit at all, let's say in the summer or in winter, for example. So sometimes when you send so many applications, let's say in December, companies aren't hiring at that moment for so many different reasons. And you don't feel discouraged by not hearing back from people. So always, always give it a try. And I would say don't, also if you see a role that's, let's say, out of your actual responsibilities, or if you might not have that much of a skill set, but you do know some bits of that role, don't be afraid to apply for it, because sometimes, they'll call you and, your personality might just be the exact fit for that particular role, and they can teach you everything else, on site when you start working with that team. So yeah, definitely don't be discouraged. So like Jade said, you have a whole career ahead of you, so it's all going to work out.
I think just one thing as well, which I did forget to mention, we've got our competition QR code up there, and I know that Eloise has dropped it in the chat. There'll be an option on there to keep in the loop of any new jobs coming up in Wiley Edge, and there'll also be an option where we'll be sending you webinars, that sort of thing. It's something that we're looking to go more into, so if you're interested, do go on the website and put your details in, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And what an insightful session. I feel like I've learned a lot as well. So I've definitely been reserving some of those tips for later. But yeah, thank you so much. And I hope you all enjoyed watching and listening. Remember, there are lots of other events going on this week, so come back for more. And the session will be recorded. And other than that, have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.